Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in to Q&A Live. I'd first of all like to begin this show by wishing you all a Happy New Year. We have just come out of the holiday seasons, and thank you all for your loyal viewing over the last few years. I've been doing this show. It's a lot of fun to do, and I wouldn't do it if it wasn't for you folks watching at home. So thank you very much for tuning in. As always, I'd like to thank my sponsors. My original sponsor of this show is Christo's Pizza of Manchester, Vermont. And as I like to say, the staff here praises Christo's Pizza. They get very high marks. I can say that they make really, really, really good pizza. I can't say like the world's best. I'd also like to thank Phoenix Business Properties, which allows me to free some time up to be here and participate in this show. This is a great show. I was contacted by Mr. Steve Breakstone some time ago, and Steve said to me, I think we'd be great guests on your show. And I said, really, who are you, and why would you want to be on my show? And it didn't take but about 5 seconds of a conversation to understand that this is these two guests that I have tonight are very good guests, and this is a show that I hope every single one of you out there gets a chance to watch this show. My guests tonight are Steve Breakstone and Michael Dreiblatt, and they have written a book, How to Stop Bullying and Social Aggression. And in a world where we are faced with 2 wars and high crime rates and a series of social issues in our daily life, I can't imagine a topic that is more needs to be explained, and I'm glad that you guys are here. Thank you very much for
It's a pleasure to be here, Bob.
Michael. Thank you very much. First of all, why don't we start off this show with a little bit of background. My guess is you didn't wake up. I should also mention that they have a company called Balanced Educational Services, right, that they've started, and it's through this company that they have produced this great book. You didn't wake up, yesterday and start Balanced Educational Services. Michael, why don't I ask you to start? How did this company come about, and what was the impetus for creating this company?
Well, Steve and I go back a number of years. Steve was actually the best man at my wedding. We went to college together, so we go back quite a ways. I was a teacher for a number of years. For 16 years, I was a classroom teacher, and Steve and I had worked together before. Steve was working in the violence prevention field. He was the youth educator for Project Against Violent Encounters, and we had always known that we wanted to work together. Steve had noticed that many of the teachers were asking for more and more information on how to help with bullying, how to help with social aggression issues, and we put our heads together, and together we formed the company, and we found that there's quite a need, not only in Vermont, but throughout the nation.
When did you start?
Well, we started about 6 years ago, and it evolved, as Michael said, and I was doing work with PAVE here in Bennington County, the Domestic Violence Agency,
sure,
and working with students to teach the skills. And really what we're doing is teaching peace. We teach compassion and empathy and responsibility and respect. It is going against bullying because bullying as a child basically leads to teen dating violence, leads to domestic violence, leads to child abuse. So more and more there was more call for making sure that we were teaching children at a younger age of how to express themselves or get their needs met in a manner that is pro-social, that goes within the bounds and the morals and the values of our community, of their school, of our society. Bullying, of course, has been a real hot topic, so really tying everything together. Bullying's been a hot topic for about it's really been around for a very long time. And you can go back in literature and hear about bullying. You can watch TV shows like Andy Griffith and see when little Opie, was bullied. But the reality is about 10 years ago, about 9 years ago.
It goes back about 10,000
Well, it goes.
Absolutely.
But
it's been with us a long time.
Been with us forever, I think. Long as there's been more
time.
than 2 people on the planet.
Sure. Absolutely, right. And it became a hotter topic with Columbine 10 years ago with the school shooting in Colorado. Yeah. And the reason that really happened, where it became more of on the forefront of news, was that because they started to realize, and studies have shown, that when you have these school shootings, and there were school shootings before Columbine, there were school shootings after, that was one of the biggest, and they started to do research and showed that the people who did the shooting were actually victims of bullying and had been chronic victims for many, many years. Historically, when people had been bullied on a chronic level, very often they imploded, whether it be any type of emotional distress, depression, not doing as well in school, to suicide, to all of a sudden they were exploding out, and they would shoot those people that somehow they connected with being responsible, and they'd explode out, and then they'd start to explode back in, and then they'd wind up shooting themselves.
The good news, though, is that's not the typical way that bullying goes, although it absolutely is the case.
I was going to say that's an extreme situation.
Right.
But it does serve in a rather dark, sordid way to draw attention to the problem.
So what we're hoping to do is not only help the children, but also to help the staff to notice what are the warning signs, what can staff do to all have a same-page response to bullying, to make sure that the rules and procedures and practices are in place, and to have good lesson plans and activities that actually encourage the type of behavior that we want. It's not just about stopping the bullying, it's also about encouraging pro-social behavior at the same time.
Which is interesting because it's the type of skills that need to be taught, and every state has in their state curriculum of education about citizenship and moral development, character development, responsibility, respect, not only to others, but also to yourself, and how you show respect to yourself by, in a sense, not allowing yourself to be abused. And I like to use that word sometimes because when you think of abuse, you think of the actions of an adult. Well, bullying isn't a type of abuse, and therefore there's that connection that if a child is bullying when they're younger, it could be physically, verbally, emotionally. It's the same behaviors that they'll bring into, well, when they become a teenager and then to an adult. And therefore we have to get them when they're young.
And is it, I mean, we're talking here about bullying and social aggression, but isn't it like any and all other behavioral patterns? They start in the household, no?
That's part of it. That can sometimes be a problem. Sometimes there is role modeling going on in the household. There is some statistical evidence that families that have punitive forms of discipline or inconsistent forms of discipline will increase the likelihood of bullying. So there is some research that does indicate that it starts at the home. But there's also research that says that if in the school environment there's inconsistency, poor supervision, that there's a stratified system within the school, the cool kids and then the loser type kids, that this type of environment will encourage bullying. So you may have perfectly fine households where the child is actually behaving, the family's behaving, but they go into this other environment, in the school environment, with inconsistent or poorly laid out rules, and all of a sudden this negative side will start to emerge.
Let's expand on that a little bit. One of the things that have to be clarified is what bullying is. Bullying is an abuse of power. Somebody or a group of people have power, and they, in a sense, attack somebody or another group who has less power. There's nothing wrong with having a difference of power. You know, adult to child has a difference of power. Teacher to student, difference of power. But it's abuse of that. Now, having said that, bullying comes in many different ways. The physical type, you know, somebody who is physically threatening you or hurting you or taking your stuff. But it's also the verbal type. It's the put-downs, the insults, the exclusion, the manipulation. So when we think about where some of the role modeling comes from that inspires some of this behavior, some of it is exactly what Michael said, that one, it could be from role modeling at home. Two, it could be because of rules not being enforced. But another interesting place is very often the media. Now, to give an example, as much as I've always enjoyed sitcoms, you see a lot of humor on television, which is one person insulting and putting down somebody else, and you get a laugh track. So which means to me as a child that if I insult this kid over here and I make all these people laugh, I'm not being mean, I'm not being a bully, I'm being funny. I'm being the class clown, I'm being reinforced. So I don't even think necessarily, and maybe I do, but maybe I don't, that I'm bullying him as much as I'm focused on this is what works. This is what humor is. You watch television, whether it might be Showbiz Tonight or Entertainment Tonight or even something like Nancy Grace, to give an example, the news media, where we talk about other people, we gossip about other people, we have a good time doing that. I become a person who has interesting things to say. The fact that I'm putting him down and insulting him and gossiping about him, well, that's beside the point.
Sounds like a political campaign.
Exactly. You talk about mixed messages to the kids.
Now, some of those verbal bullies don't even realize that they're bullying. They've got 15 people laughing. They're not thinking about the one person who's getting upset.
Right.
It can be very confusing for a
Sure,
child.
it's humor at the expense of others, but
Sure.
I mean, I'm old enough to go back to the Three Stooges and that era. That was all about physical harm and in a humorous way.
You know, that's interesting that you mentioned about physical harm in a humorous way. When we think of bullying, most of us, I'm sure you're one of those people, I know I was, when I thought of bullying, I thought of the physical bullying. But Steve mentioned it doesn't always show up as physical bullying. As a matter of fact, physical bullying is the least common form of school bullying. It's the one that staff notices the most because it's so obvious. But what's much more
Because
common...
there's some big kid picking on some little kid.
Well,
Right.
you know, even the least trained staff member, if they see a circle of kids circled around one child, they know they're supposed to respond. If they see that child with their arm pulled back, they know they're supposed to respond. What's much more common are your verbal bullies, the put-downs, the sarcasms, the leaving out, that social aggression where we don't even have to say a word. We just give you that look and turn away and
harder
walk
to
away.
spot, harder to address,
Exactly.
it's harder to cope with.
And it's much harder to catch
and much
that
more
look.
effective for the bullier and much more impacting on the...
Absolutely.
Oh, very powerful. Those subtle types of bullying can be very powerful. It goes under the radar. Teachers or adults aren't responding. Other kids may be going along with it. And you as a child, and of course, again, the weaker part in in any particular bullying situation, I don't know how to respond. And if the adults aren't making a big deal out of it, how should I make a big deal out of it? Now I'll make myself feel worse. So that's one of the things that we have to do is to get everybody on the same page of what bullying is, and especially the adults, to make sure they know how to respond and to respond. And to go back for a moment, we don't want to come off as like we don't think that comedy should be on television and the news and stuff. What we do
that's
is,
where this was going. We're obviously
Right.
banning sitcoms, and the Three Stooges are all done.
that's
like
good
the
family humor, right? I know, and it is funny. What we have to do is
You
make
heard it
sure.
here first. Banning all these shows.
Yes, no more news, no more comedies.
Just
that's
straight
it.
red
It's just
news,
hurtful.
that's it.
Actually, this isn't such a bad idea. It might actually work.
Okay, well-behaved people, boring and not having any entertainment.
No entertainment whatsoever.
But what we do is say, hey, you just have to make sure that the kids start to understand at an early age what is good humor, what is hurtful humor, what is a manner where you can tease somebody.
Playful
but you can't playful teasing. But what is the difference? And that's what we do in the book is we break it down, and it's exactly the things that we work with kids is to say, just to make sure that when you call somebody, an idiot or you look like a moron or something, and then sometimes kids will say something, oh, I'm just kidding. Well, wait a second. When is it just kidding? And
When's
part
it
of it
hurtful?
is being aware. What's your relationship with this other person? Do you know that he doesn't mind that you say something about his hair or his clothing?
Right.
If he does, and you say something, then it's not just kidding just because you say, oh, just kidding. Or they say, oh, you're too sensitive. Now I'm putting him down and blaming him.
And going back to the era of the Three Stooges,
Sure.
I think the reason that worked and that my friends would watch that show and end up really not being bullies so much as being humored by it was that the Curly, who was always the brunt
Yes,
of the
yeah,
jokes, at some point in the show always got his licks in.
Exactly.
He always got his licks in. So there was a balancing of those three characters.
Right.
who-
It goes back to that difference in power. Curly was able to come back around.
He'd come back around and he would exercise some power and influence in the relationship of the three of them. And then that's
Which, by the way,
that's usually
first time,
important.
by the way, in 57 years that I've ever actually analyzed the Three Stooges.
It's good
they didn't have
stuff.
college courses on this thing.
Wow.
But it is important to understand that there are times when you say, well, if I call him a jerk and he calls me an idiot, now we could be friends just monkeying around because guys do that, and that might be appropriate. Now you say, well, we don't do that type of playing around in this school, but at least you understand that it's not bullying, okay? Or if he is trying to bully me, and I actually can stand up for myself and I come back at him with some verbal taunts or some put-downs, now it might be a conflict But it's not bullying because it's
That
two
difference
kids
in
maybe
power.
acting inappropriately, but it's a balance of power, and we're both acting inappropriately, as opposed to he's picking on me and I'm shrinking further and further down, and it's affecting many other parts of my life. Now,
There's
we have-
that, and then there's the other dynamic of the bullying approach, the stepping up to the plate confrontation. How do you keep that from boiling over into a brawl or
Sure.
a war?
Schools
Before
have-
before
schools
I
have to
get
watch
there,
that. Sure.
I'm going to take a second and let the viewing audience know out there that my guests this evening are Steve Breakstone and Michael Dreiblatt. They are the authors of How to Stop Bullying and Social Aggression. I'm guessing that this is written mostly for teachers, but
Yes.
not necessarily. This would be good for
Parents.
Parents, for sure. If you're out there and you have
Sure.
kids that are older than 2, it'd be a good time to read this because you'll want to read it 4 or 5 times when they get to be teenagers.
That's right.
It actually teaches the skills. So when we talk about, what I just mentioned about what's the difference between teasing and taunting, or, hey, I want you to stand up for yourself if somebody goes to bully you. Well, what does that mean? And we break that down into the verbal skills, the physical skills, the eye contact, body language skills.
Tone of voice.
Tone of voice. We talk about, a lot of times bullying happens within friendship groups. Well, what happens is that
sure.
we're best friends and then we go to worst enemies because we don't know how to resolve conflicts. So one of the chapters that we have is teaching kids, you don't always get along. If you're going to have a friend, which later on, by the way, skills you're going to need when you have a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, co-worker. So we start young. If you're going to have a friend or a relationship, you're going to at times have a conflict.
Right.
Not a problem. But how do you resolve the conflict? How do you compromise? That's what we teach and break down into simple steps.
Since the beginning of time, though, if there's a group of more than 3 people,
Yes.
there's always been what we have known for our lives as a pecking order. There's always going
Yes.
to be a
Yes.
pecking order. There's
Yes.
always going to be someone at the top, and there's always going to be someone at the bottom. Isn't that just normal, natural human dynamics? And so how do you resolve that?
We accept a yes and no answer? Yes, you're right, but no, you're
This
not.
is a talk show. You get a yes or no thing. We had this discussion before we went on there.
There's some truth to that we do as humans stratify ourselves, and there is this pecking order of some who have more status within the relationship and some who have less status. That is absolutely true. How we treat the people on the bottom, how we act towards those people who have lesser status is really important. You're always going to have your student leaders, you're always going to have your children who really shine more than others. Does that mean that I can now use that power to push somebody else down?
Good
Does
point.
that now mean that I can step on somebody else? That's not okay. I think that this is a real important part of the book, that we teach those people who have status, who have power, to use it in an appropriate way and not use it to step on somebody else.
So it's teaching those leadership skills. If you want to be a leader, we have to teach them leadership skills. So it's standing up for yourself without standing on someone else.
I can almost see, using my example of strata, the person at the bottom, the person at the top who may be very self-confident, who may be an achiever and whatever we want to, however we describe that person.
Sure.
But it may be the person in the middle who isn't quite here but isn't quite there. And I'm guessing that a lot of this dynamic has to deal with insecurities, personal insecurities.
The person who's in the middle is actually the most dangerous person in the bullying dynamic, because the person at the top, they already have their status. The person who's in the middle is vying for a certain level of status
And acceptance.
and a certain level of acceptance. Gang behavior is all about wannabe behavior, all about trying to get status within a group. And that person who's trying to attempt to get status can be very dangerous, because maybe the way I'm going to get status is by being mean to him. If I buddy up to you, maybe you'll like me more. If you say, go and do something bad to Steve, I'll do it. Will you be my friend? Will you like me now? Will you be willing to be my friend? I'll do whatever it takes to fit into the group. Gang behavior is all about this vying for status, and gang behavior is about finding your place within the group, so you're not that victim person. It can be a very dangerous person, that person in the middle. The person at the top, usually pretty self-confident, already established in their position. It's those people in the middle, they're the ones who are trying to jump up a position. They can cause a lot of trouble.
I mean, we see this on a grander scale, we see this with the Idi Amins. We see this
That's
with
right.
the Saddam Husseins.
That's right.
And Saddam Hussein, I think, is probably the poster child for
Presently,
bullying.
yes.
Yeah, presently.
Yeah, but that's not the value, obviously, of our community, let alone our country. We value people that are leaders, whether you're talking about the captain of an athletic team or a squad or a political leader. What we value is that people that are lead by respect, that they don't instill fear and have leaders because people fear that if I don't follow the leader, something will happen to me. Best leader, at least from my perspective, is that I want to follow you. So now going back to that dynamic about people in the middle, if he happens to be a leader who is respectful, but definitely in charge, and he sees some wannabe who is doing something inappropriate or disrespectful to somebody else, he could say, hey, that's not the way we get ahead in this group or on this team. To give an example, I was talking to somebody who was on the cross-country ski team at the high school down in Bennington, and they were talking about how it's become part of the culture of that cross-country ski team that when you have new members come, they actually do other things. They all get along. They're welcoming the new students who may just be ninth graders, who may not have ever skied before. And there is a difference of power. Those people who are 11th or 12th graders had been on the team for years. And sometimes you hear that within teams, there's this hazing going on and this put down. Well, that team is successful because, and I don't mean only successful because of that they win races, but in actually nurturing our young students because they actually lead by bringing the fold in and leading with respect.
And the smart leaders, I think, understand that they learn more when they help teach others.
Yes.
They
get more satisfaction.
They get more satisfaction, but they also can see when you're teaching someone or trying to bring someone along, you can again, maybe see some of the mistakes that are being made, and you benefit from
Yeah.
that.
And that's one of the things that we want to teach them. There's a real good feeling about helping other people and helping other people get a step up. And then, of course, liability is a big thing in our business world across our country. And bullying and harassment is no longer acceptable. It curtails production, and it opens companies up to liability. So those people that lead when they're younger in a respectful manner, they become leaders in business or politics, and it reduces any type of liability. So it really works throughout the life cycle of any person.
Yeah.
How do we address I know that we're focused here on the playground, and our schools, but there are people who go awry, and I'm just sitting here thinking about the statement that you just said. That, this is a country that respects and idolizes strong leaders who lead appropriately, but this is a country that also houses organized crime, and you pointed out the gangs. We have
Big
serious problems with gangs in this country. I tell you what, before I'm going to let you think about that, I'm going to want to reintroduce you folks so that the listening public out there knows who we are.
Okay.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, my guests this evening are Steve Breakstone and Michael Dreiblatt, founders of, we get to name one more time.
Balance Education.
Balance Educational Services.
You got it.
And have, is this a recent publication?
August 2008, Corwin Press.
August 2008, How to Stop Bullying and Social Aggression.
When we see a child who has some leadership qualities and they start abusing others, oftentimes we want to push that child away. If they're doing bullying behavior, we want to push that person away. It's a natural response. Hey, that's not right, picking on the little guy, taking advantage of someone. It's actually the wrong way to approach it. We need to bring those children closer. We need to spend more time with that type of child, and we need to role model for that child what the correct behavior is. A lot of times in schools, when there's bullying behavior going on, we want consequences. We want that kid to suffer a consequence. And there's many different types of consequences. Punitive consequences are only one type of consequence. Loss of a privilege, loss of opportunity in the school. But sometimes the consequence is you're going to spend more time with Mr. Dreiblatt. You're going to spend time after, Now, it doesn't mean we're going to sit in detention having a stare-down contest.